Okay, well, hello everybody, welcome. Normally welcome you to St Mary's Cathedral, Limerick, but if virtually you're joining us, wherever you are, it's good that you can be with us. Just a few housekeeping things at this point. If you don't mind muting yourself on the Zoom call, because it picks up any background noise, but also I'm going to put our speaker on to full view in a moment's time. And just so you know, we are recording this talk, and if you don't wish to be visible on it, you can just turn off your camera on your screen, but I'll be maximizing the image for Margaret now in a moment. Again, this is a series of talks run by St Mary's Cathedral, Limerick, with the kind support of Limerick County and City Council and the Limerick Arts Office, and we're very grateful to them for their support. And I'd pay tribute as well to our own organist and director of music, Peter Barley, who's kindly looked after the applications and all the admin side of things for us in that application. This portion of these talks were to be held last October, but for obvious reasons couldn't be held. So today's talk is on a well-known character, Maureen O'Hara, who actually would have been 100 years old last year. So hence this is deferred to this year. And as you're all aware, there's a very strong connection with her and the Foynes Flying Boat and Museum in Foynes. We're delighted to be able to work with our partners and friends in Foynes, and we'll hear more about Maureen as we turn over to our speaker, who's Margaret O'Shaughnessy, the Managing Director of the Museum. I'm very grateful to her for willing to participate in this series of talks. So Margaret, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you, Dean. You must have got me in a very weak moment when I agreed to do it, because I was terrified of all the technology. It's a daunting task from home, but anyway, let's hope that everything works and that we'll be able to do all this. And I'm just getting a few images up now that I want to show you, and I wish you well in all the rest of them. And let's see if this works. I think it's there. I'm sure you can. You see a screen there? You can. Okay, well, I suppose the first thing I'd just like to say is that people often ask, how in the name of God did you get in tow with Maureen O'Hara? How did that ever start? So I'll just give you a little on that, and then I'll give you more on her life. It was 1987, and Dick Haslam was the county manager, and we had just built a community centre in Foynes, and Dick was having lunch with us and talking about it, and he said, what next? And I kind of said, a museum. Don't ask me where that came from, but he said, write me a letter and let's see what happens. And I did. So they were interested, and there was Trevor Lewis, a Pan Am manager at Shannon Airport at that time. Pan Am were still flying into Shannon, and I made contact with him. And he said, there's a woman you need to talk to. And he said, her name is Maureen O'Hara. And I looked at him and he said, I'll give you her number. She'd love to be involved. So a group of us got together in 1988, and we got people interested in the whole story. And we were led by a great man who has been there for so long for us, Brian Cullen, and Tom Hayes from the County Council, and Peter McGoldrick, and several more. And we started to look at the whole idea. And I had Maureen's number for quite a while. And then one night I said, look, I better ring it. So I called her. She was down in Glengarriff, where she spent many a summer. And I introduced myself. I was terrified, to be honest. But once I said I was from Foynes, that was the key to the door. Oh my God, Foynes, Charlie Blair and Foynes. And from then on, there was no issue with Maureen. She was fully behind the project and said she'd do everything she could to promote it and help us get it off the ground, not financially, but of course with her image and her connections in the media. So we had the hard job of raising, I think it was 400,000 to get the museum going. And Tony Ryan and GPA were our first big funders. And they were just fantastic, and they gave us £50,000, which was a lot of money in those days. And from there, it's gone on, and we started with 4 staff and all the rest of it. I think you all know where we're at now. So, sorry, that moved. So just to tell you a little bit about who was Maureen O'Hara and what was she like. Well, I suppose we dealt with her for 28, 29 years, so we got to know her pretty well. She was born on the 17th of August 1920 in Ranelagh in Dublin, and she was one of 6 children, and she was the second oldest. And people often ask me, she seemed to be she was 5'8" in her stocking feet, so that's a good height. She was always into play acting and doing things, and she joined the Abbey at the age of 14 and started to work backstage and all that to try and get used to it. But I suppose it was 1937, at the age of 17, that she got her big break, when she was called to London for a screen test, and her mother went with her. And the man there was Charles Lawton of Mayflower Productions. And he thought she was, not that the screen test was fantastic, and she said that herself, but she had the most magnificent eyes that never left him. So by the time she got home with her mother, there was a 7-year contract with Mayflower Productions waiting for her in Dublin. Her parents signed it on her behalf because she was only 17, and the local priest witnessed it. And she went back to London, and she made her very first movie called Jamaica Inn with Charles Lawton. During the making of that movie, there was a guy working on the set called George Brown, and this was the start of her many disastrous marriages, I suppose. And anyway, very innocently, she went out on dates with him, and then she was going to be sailing to America on the Queen Mary with Lawton and her mother. And she says she turned up at a house to have afternoon tea or whatever, and that there was a minister of some kind there, and he married them. But she left immediately, and she went off on the Queen Mary. And when she was on the Queen Mary, she told her mother about she was after getting married. And of course, you know what happened then, all hell broke loose. But she went off anyway to America. That was the last she saw of George Brown. And her next movie was The Hunchback in Notre Dame, which is a real classic, again with Charles Lawton. And from then on, she made over 53 movies. And I suppose most people know that 5 of those movies were with John Wayne. And they were mostly Westerns, but I suppose the one everybody in Ireland talks about and watches and knows the best would be The Quiet Man. She got lots of major parts and had nearly every main leading man with her, you know, Tyrone Power, Anthony Quinn, Douglas Fairbanks, Errol Flynn, all Rex Harrison. She had all of them in movies with her, but she said herself when she wrote her biography that she never got the major dramatic roles that she thought she should get. And that basically that was down to she didn't play the Hollywood game, and she didn't do the casting couch, and she stuck up very much for her principles. She eventually anyway got a divorce from George Brown, and in 1941 she met her next husband, and they got married. Will Price was his name, and he was from the southern states. He was a real gentleman, she thought, treated her fantastically and all that, and she married him. And they had a daughter, Bronwyn, who was born in 1944. But that marriage was a disaster. Will became, as she said herself, a roaring alcoholic. He squandered all her money. She was broke. And eventually, they divorced in 1953. And that was it. She continued on with her career. And then I suppose the main man in her entire life and the love of her life came into her life through her brothers and through John Wayne. And his name was Charlie Blair. And Charlie Blair, who had Irish blood in him, he was born in Buffalo, New York. He was a pilot. He was one of the main flying boat pilots coming in and out of Foynes. He holds all the records in the Atlantic on flying boat passenger flights, 3 records. He also did the first non-stop flight on the Atlantic with passengers from Foynes to New York. And then, of course, he took the last flight out of Foynes when we were finishing and flew up the street and dipped his wings to say goodbye to Foynes. So Charlie Blair had huge, huge connection with Foynes during those years. And he was called, she says, the god that walked on water. He was a bit of a daredevil as well, but of course he was a Navy pilot. He was the first man to fly over the North Pole to show that America could be bombed from Europe and America could bomb Europe over the pole. He did all these major, major flights. And she met him and it was instant love. They married in 1968, And that was the time she decided it's now time to retire from Hollywood and be a wife and share my years with Charlie. They lived in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, where Charlie set up Antilles airboats, like the bus routes of the Caribbean. They had all these small planes, and he ran this scheduled passenger flights. They came to Ireland in 1976, and I always remember, I was telling Jean before, I was married a year, had come back from Dublin to Foynes, and they landed in Foynes, huge fanfare, thousands of people there, and they came in a flying boat, and Maureen said he was the last to leave and the first to return. And all their family and everything were with them, and they arrived in, and there was a big function at Foynes Yacht Club, and it was an amazing day in Foynes. And I remember standing at the back of thousands and trying to get a view of Maureen O'Hara and this pilot, never knowing that we would become the best of friends. Unfortunately, they went, down round, they wanted a home in Ireland for the summer, and they purchased Lunchtime down in Glengariff on Bantry Bay, because that's where Charlie said he could bring in his flying boat, he could moor up the flying boat, and the house was right there. So everything was going fine until one day in September 1978, Charlie was doing a flight from St. Croix to St. Thomas, and he ran into engine trouble, and unfortunately he was killed in that flying boat, and Maureen was just absolutely devastated. He was buried in Arlington Cemetery with full military honours, because he was a brigadier general. He had been awarded so many different awards. So what did she do? There was a meeting of the shareholders of the airline, and they voted her on president of the airline to take it over. And she was the first woman president of a scheduled passenger airline in America. Another one for her to put on her belt. And then the following year, in 1979, she went to Congress with Elizabeth Taylor, I think, and several more. John Wayne was dying of cancer, and they pleaded that a congressional medal would be struck in his honor before he died. And Maureen made a very, very emotional plea and cried. Actually, you can view it, it's still on YouTube. And they said to her, if we did this medal, what do you think we should put on it? And she said, John Wayne, American. That's what was put on the medal and presented to, he died and was presented to his family. And you can come and see those medals in our exhibition at the museum as well. She had several things she really wanted to do. Another one in 1999, she was invited to become the Grand Marshal of the St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York. And that was one of the things really, really she wanted to do. And again, we have all her clothes and her sash and everything from that day. Personality-wise, she had red hair. She was the Queen of Technicolor, that's what they called her. She had beautiful features. We did a bronze bust of her for her 80th birthday, which is at the museum. And Jim Connolly down in Kilbaha did it. And he said to me, she had the most extraordinary bone structure. He'd never seen anything like it. So after all this time, she kind of moved more permanently to Ireland and to Glengariff. And I have to say that from the time she officially opened our museum in 1989, if we were doing the opening of a sweet paper after that, we called on Maureen, and Maureen arrived to launch books and launch stamps and launch everything. And, you know, she really was magnificent to do all that for us. And as I'm talking, I forgot to move on your slides, I'm sorry. She's here with Margaret Heckler opening the museum in 1989, and this is her beloved Charlie. And as I say, they had a wonderful life. If you look at all the people like she was with, all the main stars, and she loved playing with any of the Irish. Milo O'Shea was a great friend of hers as well, as was, I said, Anthony Quinn. She had a lot of great movies, but never the big ones she wanted. And The Quiet Man and John Wayne, I suppose, was the main one for all of us. You'd be delighted to know that we have an exhibition at the museum. I should say that in 2012, unfortunately, she moved back to America to live with her grandson. And at that stage, I suppose the memory was going a little bit like lots of people, and he wanted to look after her. So she moved to Boise, and in 2014, she got the other dream that she had, and she was presented with an honorary Oscar by Liam Neeson and Clint Eastwood. And she was wheeled out onto the stage to receive that. And they played Danny Boy, and you can see in the film clip Maureen's mouth moving, singing Danny Boy as she moved onto the stage. And it was a very emotional night in 2014 when she got that. And then, of course, the time came on the 24th of October 2015. She passed away peacefully in her sleep. We got a shock. We didn't know that she was that ill, and she really wasn't. She hadn't spent a lot of time being very ill in that. And the time went, and then she was to be buried in Arlington Cemetery with her beloved Charlie Blair. And I was fortunate to be asked by the family to come over to that funeral, which I did, where I met John Wayne's family, and that it was a real experience because the American Air Force carried the casket into the graveyard in Arlington. And I have to say, you know, we had a big blacked out cars, and about 20 went. There was 36 Irish American bagpipers that Conor Bowe, her grandson, flew down from Chicago, that she met when she was making Only the Lonely up there. And they played at the wake the night before, and they played at the graveside as well. And he hosted an Irish dinner afterwards, and we had bacon and cabbage. I was expecting that we were going to get this phenomenal dinner in this top hotel in Washington, D.C. It was bacon and cabbage. And it was a lovely day. We had good fun. We told stories about her. And the Wayne family told she was godmother to two of John Wayne's children. And people ask all the time, was she romantically linked with John Wayne? So I might as well answer, no. They were absolutely the best of friends. The two families were the best of friends. She stood for two of his children, and she was with him shortly before he died. He looked to speak to her. So they really had a very strong friendship. And I think it was because he said she was the best guy he ever knew. She was tough. She did her own stunts. You know, she didn't shy away from anything. And as I say, you wouldn't take her on in an argument. She'd win. She'd often be at the museum, and she'd be telling the girls about how she was trained to walk and to carry herself. And she'd put a sweeping brush behind their backs and make their hands twinkle into it. And she'd make them walk up and down, telling them how you could keep a proper posture and that. But two of the things that I'd just like to tell you, and I think some might know, in 1946, Maureen decided she'd take out dual citizenship. And she went through the process. She filled the forms, she did the exam, all of that. And she went to finally get it. And when she went into the courtroom, she was asked to fill up a final form where she had to fill in her previous nationality. And she went up and down the form, and Ireland wasn't there. So she went up to the girl at the desk, and she said to her, she said, I'm sorry, this is the wrong form. She said, no, it's the right form. No, she said, it's the wrong form. I'm Irish. I was born in Dublin. I can't click Ireland. It's not here. Well, they said, if it's not there, it's not there. Click the UK. So that really got to her. And she said, no way. I'm not British. I will never click that I'm British. I'm Irish. So they said to her, well, unfortunately, Miss O'Hara, if that's the case, you can't take out American citizenship. You have to fill that form. So she said, what can I do about it? And they said, you've got to go to court, and you've got to go in front of a judge and make your case. So she said, when can I do it? And they said, let us see. And she got it that evening. She went into court, and she went in front of a judge, and she made her case that I'm Irish. I need to be Irish. And she said, it's not here. What am I to do? And he said, well, if it's not there, it's not there. I'm a busy man, you know, kind of click UK again. So she kicked up a stink in the courtroom, and there was no changing the judge. So he said, get that woman out of here. We've dealt with our business. So she was going out the door, and she turned back, and she said to him, Your Honour, do you know what you've just done? And he said, what? And she said, you've just deprived my children and my grandchildren of their Irish heritage that they'd be so proud of. Can you live with that? And he said, give her what she wants, get her out of here. So the form was rubbed out, UK, Ireland was written, she ticked it, and she got her American citizenship. It seems Dave heard about it, and he wrote to her, and he said, when next you're coming to Ireland, bring me those papers. And she did. And we have a lovely photograph of herself and Dev looking at the papers and the hat she'd on her. We actually have the hat in the museum now as well. But it was to show you how much she appreciated being Irish, how Irish she was always, and how she promoted Ireland. I've seen her thousands of times, you know, all the time, go to Ireland, go to Ireland. And she never ever failed the Ireland Fund. You know, they've all honoured her, all the states have honoured her. And actually, before she died, one of the things she said to honour her memory was go visit Ireland. So, you know, she never forgot it. The only thing I think that she would have loved, and she never got, and it's too late now, was to be made, get the freedom of Dublin, because that was her hometown and she never got it. And it's such a pity. And several of us tried, but it wasn't to be. But, you know, I probably have gone on long enough now, Dean, but the thing is that I suppose she was the trailblazer for, you know, the Ruth Negas and the Saoirse Ronans and all of the ones that came after. She was the first major Irish movie star, and she held on. She was very religious. When we brought home, when Conor Bowe asked us, her grandson, did we want some for material? And we said we'd love it. I went over to Boise in Idaho. I brought home 3 40-foot containers. I could have brought 10. She was a hoarder. She held on to absolutely everything. But the one thing that struck me, the amount of crucifixes and the amount of rosary beads that she had. Of course, she did get the pleasure of meeting the Pope. And there's a lovely photograph of herself and her father with the Pope. So she held on to her faith despite 3 marriages and everything else. She still managed to keep that. So the museum has a lot of her memorabilia, an awful lot of her clothing, but all her awards from across America, because I think almost every state would have given her an honour. It was a Maureen O'Hara Day or honorary citizenship or whatever at some stage. And as I say, she held onto her Irishness and her love of Ireland. So now, to finish up, we are now in the process of building onto our museum, and we're hoping to get government funding in the near future to extend a lot of the museum and the aviation side, but also to add a Maureen O'Hara wing, where we will be able to show all of our visitors all the wonderful memorabilia we have, including the trap, you know, from The Quiet Man, her clothes from The Quiet Man, her Oscar, all her John Wayne medals, everything. It's a most magnificent collection to be given to us outright by her grandson, and we're very grateful to him for that. So we'd ask you in your own time, and whenever we get to open, we're not too sure when that will be, probably May or June. We have a Maureen O'Hara exhibition. We'd love you to come and see it. It's wonderful, but it's only 1% of what we'll eventually have. So I hope that gives you a little bit on Maureen O'Hara, and thank you, Dean, for asking me. And if there's anyone wants to ask me something, I'll do my best to answer it. So back to Peter or Niall.
Okay, sorry, Margaret. Yes, I'll hand over to Peter, who's our organist and director of music, again to reiterate our thanks to him for his participation in this project, and also joining us Catherine Cable, who's been responsible for the promotion of all the material. I'm very grateful to her as well for her work in that. So Peter.
Thank you very much, Dean Niall, and thank you, Margaret, for an absolutely fascinating talk. I mean, we were so lucky to get the best person to do the talk, and thank you very much for agreeing to do it. It was absolutely gripping, and to feel this close connection with such a famous person. You know, you really brought her to life for us in the last half an hour, and indeed her era. And of course, her very strong connection with Ireland, and most particularly locally with the Foynes Flying Boat Museum. And certainly, I mean, can't wait for that to be open again. It sounds wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your knowledge with us. My thanks again, as the Dean's already mentioned, to Catherine Cable, who helped us to promote this series. And our thanks again to Limerick City and County Council and the Limerick Culture and Arts Office, and Dr. Pippa Little, who's a Culture and Arts Officer. They kindly gave us a grant to help support these talks and other events we hope to put on later in the year, hopefully in the cathedral when it's possible to do so. more immediately, next week, there is a second talk. So this is a series of 4 talks over Tuesday at lunchtimes. And actually, that'll be a very straightforward link. It's just the church services link. You'll see it on all the publicity for these talks. So that'll be me, actually, just on my own in the cathedral, talking to you about Sasol. So, as you would have gathered, the impetus behind these talks has been various anniversaries, both last year and this year. And next week, we commemorate the 100th anniversary of the death of the famous French composer Camille Saint-Saëns, famous for, amongst other things, the Colonel of the Animals, of course. So, most importantly, though, from today, thank you to the Dean for hosting this talk via the wonders of modern technology. And last but absolutely not least, thank you, Margaret O'Shaughnessy, for a fantastic talk, really, really interesting. And I guess if anybody, while I've been wittering on, has had another thought of a question, now is your last chance, I guess, other than going to the museum and chatting to Margaret there. Right, it looks like everyone's going to be going to chat to you, Margaret, when you open.
I don't think, just Peter, just for a second, if anyone has any, they might raise their hand or virtual hand if they have. I'll just check the screens here. Nope. No, Peter's no one there.
Grand. So look, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for coming. And do come next week. And then it's Florence Nightingale week after. And then the last week is Napoleon. So a rich and varied bunch this time.
All right. Thank you all very much. Maureen would be delighted to be in all that company anyway. To think she was as important as Napoleon and all the rest of them. She'd have got a good kick out of that.
Absolutely.
Thank
Great.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Margaret. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.